time now to bring in our State House insiders, Antoine Seawright, our Democratic strategist, Dave Wilson, our Republican strategist. Lots to get to tonight, guys. Let's talk about tax refunds in South Carolina. Currently, a lot of tax refunds delayed from the state revenue department because we're being told South Carolina is not complying to certain elements of the big, beautiful bill. Antoine, what are you hearing?
Not much. I think that for people who fall into the category of tax refunds or needing those tax refunds, I'm sure there's some frustration. But I also have the blind confidence in our state leaders for whatever the reason is of why they have not complied with the big ugly bill. I fully do not comply with the big ugly bill because I know what's in it and how it will impact the people of South Carolina. So certainly there must be some elements in it that leaders in South Carolina do not agree with for the sake of South Carolina. I wish they took that same approach to all the elements of the big ugly bill.
This is just one of those places where we have government overreach. This is the people's money. This is a return of people, the money that they have put into the federal coffers coming back to them. There should be no reason for a delay. So whatever the reason is, needs to be dealt with and dealt with quickly.
Judge Few with the state Supreme Court announcing this week he will not seek re-election now, saying he does not have the votes to win. What happens with the election now for the state Supreme Court? It was supposed to have happened earlier this weekday, but now that's on hold, right?
As soon as an incumbent judge decides he or she is not going to run for their seat, if that has not been done before the process of choosing a new judge or a bank of judges to choose from in the judicial elections that take place, then that completely wipes out the entire slate and they have to start that process over again. There is a huge move that was being done because former House Speaker Jay Lucas was on the list of potential nominees for the justice position on the Supreme Court. And there were a lot of legislators who were saying, listen, we don't want this here. And some maneuvers were actually made. Few stepped down. That completely wiped the entire slate clean. And so we're going to have to see this judicial election start over again.
Well, thank Judge Few for his service. Whatever the reason is for him not having the votes, that's what our process allows for in South Carolina. Legislature decides on judges. Sadly enough, I personally believe that this gives us an opportunity to diversify the bench. We do not have an African American. I don't think there's a woman on the bench. And so I think we need reflective representation to this process. Hopefully, this now opens up that process. But I do agree with Dave that I think the former speaker being inserted into the race or being a part of the race has caused some dynamics to change for the good and for the bad. And so I think this is actually a response to that.
All right, there is one female member of the state Supreme Court in South Carolina currently. I want to move on to something that happened today in the House of Representatives. The Legislative Black Caucus protesting the naming of roads and bridges in South Carolina after Charlie Kirk, Antoine. Gilda Cobb-Hunter of Orangeburg saying there is no honor in naming someone who has no honor, calling Kirk a divisive figure, saying his message sowed seeds of racism. They're talking about renaming a portion of Highway 76 in Lawrence County after Kirk and a bridge in McCormick County. Both resolutions passed along party lines, but there's some pushback from the Legislative Black Caucus today.
Well, as it should be. And while some in the conservative movement may praise Charlie Kirk for his loyalty to the president and to their cause, you cannot ignore the divisive approach and language that he used with his time here on earth. He made a living and a giving. He was very proud of that. And all of a sudden now we want to act as if he did not say or do some of the things he did when he was alive. I think it's a different conversation when you talk about honoring folks, putting their names on buildings and roads and such. We usually do that with people who have been traditionally been able to bring folks together and have done something for the good. I don't think that the work of Charlie Kirk speaks broadly to that. In fact, I can name a number of people who've taken their names off buildings or taken their names off of roads because of the type of reputation they've had. And certainly, I don't think Charlie Kirk deserves a road naming in South Carolina. So I applaud the Legislative Black Caucus for their approach. And I think we have to be more intentional about how we name roads and buildings and such after people in our state.
There are very few rules that go into this. It becomes I want to choose to do this type of process. And that is becoming somewhat confusing because we're naming roads, we're naming bridges as a way to honor people. And while yes, there are some people who want to honor Charlie Kirk, let's talk about the South Carolina perspective here. Let's look at the longer term thing. It took for the longest time for us to start naming roads for Martin Luther King Jr. And that was far after his death. And so I think while there are people who want to make that type of honoring discussion, this is probably not the time and the place for that.
I want to talk about some breaking news that happened today. Kristi Noem out at the Department of Homeland Security. The president says she's going to become a special envoy for the Shield of Americas. Those details are going to be released this weekend. But the 54-year-old Noem out after some controversy, Antoine.
Well, a $220 million contract that she says she can't speak to or speak of. We've seen ICE shoot 12 people since September. We've seen 2 people executed on camera, the arrest of 1-year-olds and 5-year-olds, ICE illegally entering the homes of businesses and residents who are American citizens. And so the agency's been a disaster, unqualified, unserious, should have never had the job. In fact, my Republican friends love to quote, government should be ran as a business. In the business world, she would have never been able to apply for or interview for that job. She had the job. So I'm glad that she's been fired. Now we just have to put some reform measures in place at that agency.
Well, we see all the time going on with government agencies, and it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat. So often these are political positions. They're given to people as a thanks for the work that they've done. But that doesn't always mean that the most qualified person is in that position. You want to have that in certain areas. People who handle our finances, people who handle our transportation, people who are working when it comes to law enforcement. And this is a political appointment that now the president is backing off on because there's been a lot of heat out there, to Antoine's point, over the fact that you've had ICE issues that are going on. We've got issues going on with TSA. And so now it's time for them to say, wait, we're going to pull back. So is she a scapegoat politically? Absolutely she is.
All right. Dave Wilson, Antoine C. Wright. Guys, as always, thank you so very much for your time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be back with much more in just